Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels. We'll be getting to the JRC here in a moment, but as per usual, first a few quick disclaimers and the trigger warnings. If you're unfamiliar with the Stop the Shot campaign or the campaign against the troubled teen industry, pertinent links are going to be right there in the description box for you, along with what I hope to be some helpful labels right above them so that you know what you're clicking on. So if you want to do a little bit more deep diving in regards to the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center, you're certainly welcome to do so. Trigger warnings. When we discuss places like the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center or Agape Boarding School for Boys, you're going to hear vivid descriptions of and catch clip surveillance footage of people with mental health issues and disabled people being tortured and abused. For those reasons, we do have this channel marked not for kids. So, if your child is 16 and younger and watching this, parental supervision is something that is very much to be advised. Alright? Short, sweet, and to the point, because my God, there seems to be a never-ending stream of work suddenly thrust upon me because we're dealing with GOP slashing into things that they do not understand, destroying programs they didn't even know existed, because this is what happens when you essentially use a chainsaw in regards to treating a wound that requires a scalpel. Just saying. So, we're going to go ahead and get through this one. I'm going to take care of some chores, come back, we'll go ahead and get the second video done for the day. And also, tomorrow, on top of course, me going ahead and getting into Down the Rabbit Hole series, we're also going to pre-record on the Medicaid series as well, because this coming Saturday, May the 31st, is Mercy Day up at Silver Dollar City. And you bet I'm going to be there. I am an unpaid, shameless shill for the Hershen family, and I absolutely regret nothing. Alright, so let's go back to where we left off. The bullet points, right? And because it's the JRC warning, I'm going to probably have to repeat myself again. The FDA expressly allowed the use of this device for this purpose for decades, but then abruptly reversed course and asked the JRC to make a new 510K presentation, which the JRC duly prepared at great expense. The FDA terminated the whole process without explanation and on the eve of a pre-501K meeting. Is that correct, JRC? Is that really true? Because I remember reading in the transcripts from the original hearing, no less, that the FDA reported there was a whole lot of ducking and weaving in regards to getting your devices actually vetted and licensed, but it wasn't coming from the FDA side, it was coming from yours. So, because I like fact checking, I like it a whole lot. And I'm also willing to admit the times when I am wrong. We are going to go ahead and take a look at that, shall we? So I'm just going to highlight this whole little paragraph here. Let's find out. I wonder, let me see. We're going to tweak it a little bit. Shorten it up a little bit. We're going to try to search for that again, shall we? Not, screw it, we may try Grok. I want one of these AIs to answer this question for us. Just in case. Fine. Alright kids, we're gonna try Grok. There we go. Okay, so we are going to go again and see what Grok has to say about it. And apparently, we've got an essay. Okay, so here's what we say. Yes, based on the available information, the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center, JRC's claims about the FDA's actions regarding the graduated electronic decelerator device have some basis, but the situation is nuanced. Here's a breakdown. How many times have we seen that since we've been doing a little bit of live fact checking? How often is it that the JRC leaves out entirety the context? Yeah. Anybody surprised? I'm not surprised. FDA's initial allowance. The JRC's GED device, an electric stimulation device, ESD, used for aversive conditioning to treat self-injurious behavior and aggressive behavior, was cleared by the FDA in 1994 through the 510K pre-market notification process. So JRC, question, just real quick here. If you feel like the FDA should have no authority over your device because it's not sold commercially, why did you submit it for their testing back in 1994, right after Dr. Israel first introduced it as a part of the overall treatment? Inquiring minds would like to know. The clearance was for treating patients with severe SIB where other therapies had failed. Aversive conditioning devices, including the GED, were classified as Class 2 devices in 1979, were regulated under the 510K process, indicating the FDA allowed their use under specific conditions for decades. You notice that thing about medical care, though. It changes, it evolves, and the more barbaric forms of treatment tend to go the way of the dodo as we get better information, we get more learned in a subject, and we find better ways. But nobody told the JRC that. Anyways, let me go ahead and continue here. The FDA's request for a 510K in December 2012. Note that date, folks, because that was during the time period where the video surveillance footage of what took place in 2002, where the student Andre McCollins was asked by a JRC staff member to remove their coat. He said no. That's all Andre did. He did not stand up. He did not close his fists. He didn't even look directly at the individual who was speaking to him at that point in time. All he did was literally say no. After which, he was then shocked with a volt of electricity that was so strong that it literally contracted his muscles to the point where he fell onto the floor. After which he tried to get under his desk to get away from those who were using the device on him. They drug him out, slammed him on a 4-point board face down, put a noise-canceling helmet over his head. If that's not raising red flags just by itself, I don't know about you. And then was proceedingly shocked over 31 times within a 7-hour period. Other things he was shocked for was things that were absolutely involuntary, such as tensing the muscles was considered a sign of aggression, instead of, the logical, more scientific thing of muscles who get shot with electricity tense on their own, whether we want them to or not, but we can't let logic get in the way of the JRC's getting their sadist on now, can we? And yeah, that video surveillance footage that was ordered to be released, as well as being played in court, that happened in 2012. Is it any surprise whatsoever, after that video came out and went viral, that the FDA would then reverse their former stance and demand that the device being used be submitted for testing, vetting, and licensing, in spite of the multiple decades where they've left it alone? That is the situation of new facts have come to light. And we are finding from what we are seeing from the evidence in front of our own eyeballs is that the JRC seems to be less than truthful. For that reason, we want you to submit that device for proper testing and vetting. It seems pretty basic standard procedure to me. You renew your stance based on new information. It is done in medical circles every single day. I mean, let's use an example. For decades and decades and decades, people smoked cigarettes with not knowing that they could cause things such as lung cancer, among other health issues, right? You watch the 1920s silence, which I do. I watch them a lot, at least one every evening. I got addicted in my 20s when I stayed up late and they had the TCM Silent Sundays, but besides the point. You'll see people smoking all over it. Not just that, but you get footage of young kids, because they didn't know that there was any health concerns involved in regards to smoking, right? Decades down the line, we find out that smoking is detrimental to your health. It's detrimental to pregnant women. It is connected to a list of illnesses and issues and possible cancer down the line. So, once that was discovered, the government then required that Big Tobacco put on the Surgeon General's warning on every single pack of cigarettes, in spite of the fact that decades previously it did not have that labeling. They did so because new evidence had come to light in regards to the harm that smoking cigarettes can cause. Okay? So JRC, this isn't even a question here. This is extremely easy to see what happened and why they reversed their stance. Okay? Seriously. Let me go ahead and continue here. Cancellation of the presentation. The FDA scheduled a meeting with JRC in January 2013 to discuss the proposed 510K submission and a transition plan for patients using the device. However, the FDA canceled this meeting shortly before it was to occur, as noted in the source material. This supports JRC's claim that the FDA abruptly halted discussions. Context of the reversal. Folks, context is always key in all things. Politics, disability rights, civil rights, human rights. Context matters. Remove the context, you miss the entirety of the picture. And that's what allows people to get away with some extremely shady shit. Alright? So let's get a look here. While the FDA allowed the GED's use for decades, increasing controversy over aversive conditioning, particularly from advocacy groups like the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, and reports questioning the device's safety and efficacy prompted closer scrutiny. Now, before anybody starts going off at the mouth about us advocates again, it wasn't just us. That list included one of the biggest service providers in regards to those of us with developmental disabilities in the country. It was backed by ARC, okay? To be in particular, the ARC of the United States, to be followed up by one of the second largest Easter Seals, and a few organizations that have come along since then. They like to scapegoat us advocates because they are playing upon the fact that, unfortunately, in this world's a very ableist one. Okay? You may say that, no, Tiffany, that's not true. But the fact of the matter is, the fact that all the JRC had to do was point the finger at us to make the general public doubt the words coming out of our mouths because, quote unquote, we are disabled. It speaks volumes, okay? It speaks volumes. Just saying. The fact that I even have to bring up that massive service provider organizations were a part of the push against this device, literally from the very beginning. And the fact that we have to utilize that, and groups literally like the Special Rapporteur on Torture in the UN, to get the general public to take what we are telling them seriously. We shouldn't be having to do that, folks. Especially when you have that video surveillance footage right there on YouTube that you can see with your own eyes. Just putting it out there. Anyways, FDA inspections 2000, 2010, and 2012 found no immediate risks to patients. But by 2016, the FDA proposed a ban on ESDs for SIB and AB, citing risks like the psychological distress, pain, and burns, and asserting a lack of evidence for meaningful benefits. The final ban was issued in March 2020, though it was later challenged and overturned by the D.C. Circuit Court in 2021, which ruled the FDA lacked authority to ban a device for specific use without banning it entirely. Accuracy of the JRC's claim. Let's take a look at that. The JRC's assertion that the FDA allowed the GED device for decades is correct, as evidenced by the 1994 clearance and lack of enforcement actions for many years. The FDA's request for a new 510K in 2012 and the subsequent cancellation of the planned meeting also aligned with the JRC's narrative of an abrupt reversal. However, this shift was not entirely without precedent, as growing ethical concerns and public pressure likely influenced the FDA's actions, culminating in the attempted ban. In other words, yes, they reversed it, but because as more evidence was coming to light, especially starting around circa 2012, right after the Andre McCollum's incident being brought to the fore due to the lawsuit Cheryl McCollum's began against the JRC in particular, and the absolute vehement reaction to what everyone was seeing on that video that kind of really was the shot heard around the world for a good deal of us, especially as young advocates. We were just in our 20s, folks. Then things began to shift, and they began to think, well, I don't know that we want to even do this to where they can present the so-called safety of the device when we have all this evidence here in front of our very eyes. We have video surveillance footage here in front of our eyes of a young man being shocked within an inch of his life, begging for his life, begging and crying for them to stop. I'm pretty sure that that is pretty good evidence that not only should this meeting not take place, this device needs to not be tested, it needs to not be used, period. And therefore, using that reasoning, they decided to not go forward with the meeting. Makes perfectly coherent sense to me. What about you all? No? Alright, I'm going to read the summary, and then we're going to close out for this video so I can get a few chores done. Okay. In summary, the JRC's claims are largely accurate regarding the timeline and sequence of events. Though the FDA's actions were driven by evolving safety concerns and external pressures, which the JRC's perspective might downplay. To put it mildly, we'll go with that. For further details, you can refer to the FDA's guidance on 510K submissions or the court case documentation. Boom! So, as per usual, the JRC is leaving out the context. The context in this case that they are not revealing was this reversal began to take place right after the Andre McCollum's video went viral. It's kind of hard to justify a meeting to properly vet a device in regards to its safety when you've got a video surveillance footage of a young man being tortured, screaming and begging for help, showing you that no, it's not safe at all. And I'm going to side with the FDA on that one. At that point, you have a very clear picture in regards to the harm that that device is being capable of. So it would be far better to spend that time trying to bring this horrible practice to an end than wasting more time with the JRC's excuses, propaganda, and lies. Sounds like it makes sense to me. What about you all? Right? Okay, we're gonna go ahead and close out on that first bullet, folks. We don't get very many views on this channel, and the few we do tend to get removed from time to time. So, folks, if you wouldn't mind, please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe. Definitely would appreciate it if you got the comments. I do appreciate your time, and as always, folks, we here at Spilling Tea absolutely do hope you have a good one. I will see you all here in about 30 minutes or so. Bye, everyone. Bear with me. Bear with me a moment. Looks like we got technical difficulties. Why is that not surprising?